the Buddhist way to stop overthinking and sleep deeply. You are lying awake right now in the suffocating grip of creative imposter panic, replaying every sentence you spoke or wrote today, terrified that your mind is hollow and that your work holds no true depth. Maybe you spent moments today feeling secretly fraudulent, listening to a harsh internal voice that insists your ideas are shallow counterfeits, dreading the inevitable hour when everyone around you realizes you have nothing original to offer. The atmosphere surrounding your bed tonight is cool, earthy, and deeply tranquil. The rustic, herbal aromas of fermenting indigo leaves, damp limestone water, wood ash, and wet linen drift softly through the room, while the steady mattress supports your tired spine, offering a quiet, sheltered diehouse sanctuary that asks no immediate brilliant performance from your spirit. Dear friend, this exhausting fear of creative empty fraudulence does not mean your mind is a barren desert, nor does it mean you are fundamentally lacking in true substance. You are merely like a tired textile apprentice standing over an indigo vat, frantically trying to force unbleached linen to absorb deep cobalt blue by boiling the fiber in harsh, scalding lye. You do not have to manufacture a masterpiece before morning arrives, nor do you need to boil your mind into a state of artificial inspiration to earn complete rest tonight. Your creative core is not a shallow vessel waiting to be filled through panic, and nothing in this quiet space expects you to present a flawless banner to the world. Right now, you are gently invited to set down your heavy iron paddle, allowing your raw linen fiber to rest softly in the cool, dark bath of the present hour. A surprising, deeply liberating truth emerges from ancient Buddhist reflection when we face the torment of imposter panic. We often treat creative depth as a private property that we must aggressively construct, believing that if we could only force our thoughts to boil with constant intensity, we would finally produce work of lasting value. Yet contemplative wisdom shows us that rich depth of expression is never manufactured through internal heat or frantic effort. Authentic depth develops like indigo dye, taking its rich cobalt color not while submerged under intense friction, but during those quiet, unhurried moments when the damp fiber rests exposed to open air between cool submersions. True depth of mind is not a private treasure you must hoard. It is an organic emergence that unfolds naturally the moment you stop boiling your spirit in panic. The terrified mind mistakenly insists that stopping your frantic mental striving will expose you as an uninspired fraud. It endlessly audits every thought, attempting to force your raw, quiet nature into a loud spectacle, convincing you that relaxing your internal pressure will result in total creative emptiness. But a high mountain dye house perched beside a cold alpine stream does not boil its indigo vats to force color into the cloth. It simply lets the dark plant liquid ferment in cool stoneware, trusting that the fabric will darken in its own time as the air touches the wet threads. Think of how much vital sacred energy you have burned by trying to boil your own spirit in the dark. Maybe you have felt this too, lying awake with a tight contraction behind your throat, staring at a blank screen or a draft of words, convinced that your mind is empty, feeling utterly trapped in a cage of your own performance. Trying to ignite creative genius by aggressively scolding your heart in the middle of the night only scorches your fine fibers and leaves your mind exhausted. What if, for these quiet hours, we extinguish the harsh charcoal fire under the pot? What if we permit your awareness to rest like a piece of raw, unbleached linen soaking softly in a cool, dark stoneware vat tonight? Let the small, guarded muscles around your eyes, forehead, and cheeks soften completely. Release the tight, defensive grip you have been holding in your jaw, your throat, and your chest. Feel the broad, unyielding support beneath your body, carrying the full weight of your bones without asking you to prove your artistic worth tonight. Listen to the long, quiet cadence of your breath moving through your lungs, slow, smooth, and completely unhurried in the darkness. There is no audience you must impress right now. Let your breath move like cool mountain air drifting across quiet drying racks, steady, soft, and entirely unforced. Perhaps you learned early in life to link your worth to constant, impressive output, building a habit of intense self-criticism whenever your creative well ran quiet. In the tradition of Zen wisdom, we do not view your expression anxiety as a disgraceful flaw that must be hidden. It is seen as a misdirected impulse of devotion, a deep desire to contribute something meaningful that has simply lost its patient rhythm. You do not need to burn yourself out to prove that your life holds genuine depth. You need only to permit your fibers to soak gently in the cool liquid of this present moment, trusting that every quiet breath you draw is nourishing your unforced nature. In a short while, we will travel to a high mountain dye house where a young apprentice weeps beside a tub of scorched, ruined cloth because he tried to force indigo pigment with scalding heat. But right now, let your physical frame yield to the simple, unconditional security of this quiet room. The walls around you are solid, keeping out the cold alpine draft, and the dark air here is a calm, neutral shelter that permits your tired mind to drop its heavy expectations. You do not have to write a brilliant sentence, solve a creative problem, or guarantee your future depth before dawn arrives. Your true depth was never dependent on forced effort or constant brilliance. Your mind was born like raw mountain linen, fully equipped with the organic texture needed to absorb the quiet colors of life, hold rich meaning, and bloom in its own season. Let the tight contraction around your ribs melt away entirely. Let your fingers uncurl slowly upon the bed, your hands soft and still, like damp fiber resting quietly in a stoneware vessel. There is no panel of judges waiting in this dark room tonight, no iron paddle you must wield, and no fear of emptiness heavy enough to destroy the quiet depth of your presence right now. You have reached the end of the day's frantic performance, and your present stoneware vat is completely cool enough to carry your rest. As we move deeper into the quiet night ahead, remember that your true nature is like raw linen, taking color from an indigo bath. It does not gain its richness by being scorched over harsh flames. The frantic demands of your internal imposter can drift past your mind, leaving your central awareness grounded, whole and profoundly safe in the quiet dark. Let the tired muscles around your neck and spine melt into the darkness. Let your legs grow heavy and motionless upon the bed, your ankles and feet loose and completely supported by the mattress. There is no creative test you must pass in this room tonight, no expression panic you must resolve alone, and no inner hollow space vast enough to disturb the steady current resting beneath your spirit right now. You are resting inside your own unforced sanctuary, and your present atmosphere is completely calm enough for you to extinguish the fire. Up in the mist-filled gorge of the northern valley, where the high mountain dye houses prepared silk and linen for ceremonial robes, the cool night air smelled perpetually of fermenting indigo leaves, damp limestone, wood ash, and wet cloth. Working as an apprentice dyer in this quiet stone sanctuary was a young man named Kale, who carried a secret, agonizing terror of his own creative emptiness. Having been taken in by the guild after showing early promise, Kale lived under the constant, crippling suspicion that his talent was a complete illusion, a temporary fluke that would vanish, leaving him exposed as a shallow imposter before the senior masters. This expression panic drove Kale into an exhausting, desperate routine of Latinite labor. Long after the senior dyers had extinguished their hearths and gone to sleep, Kale remained huddled in the dimly lit stone dye house. In his right hand, he held a specialized tool, a heavy iron dye-stirring paddle, with a smoothed ashwood handle encrusted with dried blue crust. Every night, Kale prepared large stoneware vats of raw, unbleached linen fabric intended for the sanctuary banners. Whenever he looked at the pale, plain cloth resting in the tubs, a cold wave of horror hit his stomach. He convinced himself that unless he forced the pigment deep into the center of every fiber instantly, the fabric would prove his utter lack of true skill. On this freezing autumn night, as a harsh wind howled through the timber roof slats, Kale's internal panic reached a fever pitch. Replaying a moment from earlier in the day when a visiting scholar examined his work in silence, Kale felt an overwhelming wave of fraudulence. He viewed that quiet moment as absolute proof that his mind was empty and worthless. To compensate for his perceived inadequacy, he built a massive fire of oak charcoal beneath a brass cauldron, filling it with harsh lye and dark indigo plant liquor. He seized a bolt of fine raw linen and shoved it into the boiling liquid. With frantic, violent strength, he drove his heavy iron paddle into the cauldron, churning and scrubbing the cloth against the scalding brass sides. Sweat poured down his face despite the icy draft. His eyes burned from acrid smoke, his lungs gasping for clear air. He believed that if he kept the fire roaring and stirred with relentless force, he could compel the dye to penetrate the cloth in a single night. The boiling lye grew thick and dark, bubbling aggressively around the ashwood handle. Under the relentless grinding of the iron paddle against the heated metal, the delicate linen fibers began to weaken and break apart. With a sickening tear, the bolt of linen shredded in the boiling pot. Blackened, scorched fragments of fabric floated to the surface, completely ruined by the intense heat and violent friction. Cale dropped his iron paddle onto the wet stone floor with a loud clang. He sank to his knees beside the hearth, his head buried in his dye-stained hands, tears of pure humiliation stinging his eyes. In his mind, that tub of scorched, shredded cloth was the ultimate mirror of his spirit. He believed he had proven once and for all that he possessed no genuine artistic depth, that his mind was a hollow vessel, and that he was condemned to ruin everything he attempted to create. Stepping softly through the low doorway of the dye house, holding a small paper oil lamp, was Sister Shin, an elder mountain dyer who had tended the sanctuary vats for 50 autumns. Sister Shin wore a dark indigo smock over her coarse hemp robes, her face creased like dry limestone, her eyes holding a vast, unhurried stillness. She had quietly observed Cale's frantic Latinite fires for weeks, watching the young man burn away his spirit out of sheer terror. Sister Shin walked over to the kneeling apprentice, her wooden clogs clicking softly against the damp floor. She did not scold Cale for wasting the linen, nor did she offer a light, cheerful speech about trying again tomorrow. Instead, she set her paper lamp on a stone ledge, picked up a clean, unbleached linen towel, and wiped the sweat and bitter ash from Cale's forehead. She then walked over to a large, unheated stoneware vat sitting in the darkest corner of the room. This vat contained an old, cool indigo bath that had been fermenting quietly in the dark for months, smelling deeply of rich earth and limestone water. Sister Shin reached into a basket and pulled out a fresh, raw piece of unbleached linen. She handed the plain cloth to Cale, asking him to step away from the hot hearth and stand beside the cool stoneware vat. Cale took the fabric with trembling, soot-stained hands. His mind was still racing, his pulse pounding with the residual panic of his failure. Sister Shin asked Cale to lower the raw linen gently into the cool, dark liquid, without stirring, without heating, and without forcing the cloth against the sides of the vat. She asked him to let the fabric soak in total stillness for just a few long breaths. Cale hesitated, convinced that a cold, unheated bath could do nothing for the pale fiber. Yet under Sister Shin's calm, steady gaze, he lowered the linen into the dark stoneware vessel, watching it submerge beneath the still, dark surface. After a few long moments in the dark liquid, Sister Shin asked Cale to lift the cloth slowly out of the vat and hold it up into the cool night air that drifted through the open window. Cale lifted the wet linen into the dim light. When it first emerged from the dark liquid, the fabric was not blue at all. It was a dull, pale copper-green color that looked completely unimpressive. Cale felt an immediate contraction of disappointment in his chest, believing the cool bath had failed entirely. Sister Shin placed her warm hand over his wrist, asking him to remain still and simply watch the wet cloth as the cool air touched its surface. As Cale held the damp linen motionless in the night air, a quiet wonder began to unfold before his eyes. As the air interacted with the wet fibers, the dull copper-green color began to shift. Slowly, smoothly, without a single motion from Cale's hands, the cloth transformed from pale green into a deep, luminous, vibrant cobalt blue. The color seemed to bloom out of nowhere, saturating the threads evenly and deeply, without a single scorch mark or broken fiber. Sister Shin picked up the iron dye paddle from the floor and held it out toward Cale. She asked him if the deep blue color had been created by the heavy iron blade or the roaring fire beneath the pot. Cale stood in the quiet stone dye house, holding the glowing cobalt linen in his hands, smelling the fresh, earthy aroma of the cool vat and the mountain wind. A profound wave of emotional recognition broke through Cale's chest, loosening a painful, tight knot that had locked his ribs for years. He saw with sudden, overwhelming clarity how his entire life had been spent trying to boil his own mind in the dark, frantically churning his thoughts with an iron paddle out of absolute terror that he was empty. He recognized that his internal panic had never produced true beauty or authentic expression. It had only scorched his fine fibers, leaving his heart exhausted, torn, and burning with unnecessary shame. He looked down at his dye-stained hands, feeling the soft, strong texture of the cobalt cloth between his fingers. He realized that the fabric did not need to be boiled to take on color. The depth lived in the quiet interaction between the cool bath and the open air. His breath released in a long, shuddering sigh, his shoulders dropping away from his ears as a deep, unfamiliar relief washed through his bones. Yet as Sister Shin set the paper lamp down and turned to check the other stoneware tubs in the room, a quiet, lingering doubt remained in Kale's mind. He had seen the magical transformation of the cool linen, but he did not yet know how his mind could stop reaching for the iron paddle when the cold voices of imposter panic returned in the dark. The alpine wind continued to rustle softly through the timber roof slats, and the stone dye house settled back into its cool, quiet darkness, holding the stoneware vats safe and still upon the damp floor. Kale stood alone in the quiet space, holding the cobalt cloth against his chest, wondering how a human heart could learn to lay down its heat and trust its unforced depth. This quiet transformation beside the stoneware vat does not ask you to extinguish your passion for meaningful work, nor does it demand that you become cold and unfeeling toward your creative expression. Deep contemplative wisdom has never been about turning your mind into a sterile void or pretending that your desire to contribute does not matter. It does not expect you to face a blank page, a complex project, or an awkward silence with indifferent apathy. Feeling a sharp prick of vulnerability when you offer your work to the world is a completely natural, human response. It reveals the honest care of a heart that longs to connect, to share, and to bring something genuinely beautiful into existence. Experiencing an occasional wave of doubt simply shows that your inner sensitivity is alive and open. When a difficult creative moment occurs, when your thoughts feel scattered or your words seem clumsy, a simple, unavoidable vulnerability touches your chest. That initial moment of awkward stillness carries its own authentic truth. Much like a piece of raw linen waiting in its natural state, it asks for gentle patience, quiet presence, and an unhurried breath. Living as a conscious, creative human being means that dry seasons and quiet pauses will naturally happen as we walk our path. Yet observe closely what happens inside your mind during those long, dark hours when you lie awake trying to punish yourself for feeling empty. This is where the exhausting, crushing weight of imposter panic builds its heaviest prison. Driven by an intense terror that our quiet human nature makes us fraudulent or talentless, our thinking begins to demand an immediate spectacle. We force our tired mind to boil with frantic mental chatter, churning our self-doubt with heavy iron paddles and scolding ourselves furiously for failing to radiate constant genius. We take a natural, passing pause in our output and turn it into a permanent verdict of personal failure, scorching our fine mental fibers until our spirit feels shredded and hollow. This frantic effort to force instant brilliance through internal friction is what ancient wisdom recognizes as the primary source of our deepest spiritual exhaustion. In our modern daily lives, this internal strain is not an abstract concept. It is that sore throat and heavy chest at midnight after hours of frantically auditing your worth. It is the overwhelming, false conviction that if you stop boiling your mind right now, you will lose your talent completely and be exposed as an empty fraud. Consider what actually happens when you force your mind to run a hot fire over every quiet thought. The initial feeling of emptiness was merely a brief, neutral space in time, asking only for a soft, patient rest before the next dip. But by insisting that your mind must boil until it yields immediate results, your thinking creates an immense secondary agony. The initial creative pause was merely a single, plain thread. Your relentless internal prosecution, your self-insults, and your panic over being ordinary are the bitter, acrid smoke created entirely by your refusal to let the cloth rest in cool water. Profound spiritual reflection shows us that most of the suffocating burnout you carry tonight does not come from an actual lack of talent. It grows from the unrelenting, guarded demand that you must constantly prove your depth through spectacular output. It comes from treating your natural, quiet pauses as disgraceful defects, rather than the dark stoneware vat through which your true color matures. The quiet spaces inside your mind carry no power to diminish your worth, But standing in the dark, frantically churning your own thoughts will always leave your spirit scorched and bleeding. When we cultivate a soft, unhurried presence toward our actual mental state, we are not abandoning art, nor are we inviting mediocrity. True spiritual maturity is simply the quiet, brave willingness to let your raw linen be unforced as it is. It is the willingness to notice the familiar urge to reach for the iron paddle and to whisper softly to yourself, "My mind is allowed to be quiet right now, and this stillness does not mean I am empty." When you set down the iron blade and allow your awareness to rest in the cool bath of the present moment, an immense, soothing relief washes through your entire frame. This is the profound comfort of true self-compassion made real in your spirit. Self-forgiveness means recognizing that a piece of raw linen taking its color slowly through cool water and open air possesses a dignity that 1,000 scorched banners could never match. When you stop fighting the natural rhythm of your mind, the terrifying, shame-filled stories about your fraudulence vanish, dissolving into the dark, quiet stoneware of your present room. The indigo vat yields its richest blue not because it was forced to boil, but because it was permitted to ferment quietly in the dark, allowing its organic elements to harmonize in stillness. The hottest fire can burn beneath a cauldron, but it only destroys the delicate threads placed inside. In the exact same way, when you stop forcing your mind to produce constant heat, your spirit recovers its natural, unshakable depth. The need to compulsively measure your creative output falls away, leaving a grounded, peaceful presence that knows how to hold both action and rest with equal grace. This grounded, quiet presence is your true enduring sanctuary. It was never created by a brilliant performance, nor was it diminished when your mind felt quiet or scattered during a busy day. The spacious awareness inside you that observes your imposter panic is completely unmarred by the doubt itself. It remains deep, cool, and steady, like the rich limestone water resting undisturbed beneath a mountain night. Offering soft reverence to your real, unvarnished nature is not a surrender to laziness. True trust in your life is simply the willingness to inhabit the quiet stoneware of this present hour, trusting that the organic intelligence of your spirit knows how to gather depth without the aid of a whip. It is the quiet courage to say, "My mind is in a cool bath right now, and I will let my fiber rest without fire tonight." Slowly, a deep, restorative understanding settles into your bones. You begin to see that dropping your frantic mental effort is not an act of creative surrender. It is the natural, noble return of a soul coming home to its own sacred depth. Surrendering the exhausting struggle to appear constantly brilliant is not a defeat. It is the quiet doorway to discovering the timeless wisdom that has always lived within your unforced heart. As you lie here in the soft shelter of your bed, feeling the broad mattress holding your spine, you can feel how close this inner ease really is. It does not require you to write a masterpiece overnight, nor does it demand that you eliminate every self-doubt before you are allowed to rest. It requires only a soft moment of permission, a gentle loosening of your tight throat, allowing your spirit to settle into the cool, dark stoneware of this hour under a quiet, starlit sky. In a short while, we will practice a very simple way of feeling this cool indigo bath within your own physical frame. But even right now, as you listen to these gentle words, notice how your lungs expand and release without asking for an artificial fire. Your breath moves softly through the dark, supported by the calm air of the room. Steady, quiet, and completely unforced, exactly as you are. Now, if it feels comfortable for your physical body in this quiet space, permit your frame to yield gently into the bed beneath you. There is no rigid posture you must force, and no correct alignment you need to maintain tonight. You might let your arms rest loosely along your sides, or perhaps place one soft hand over your lower ribs, wherever your shoulders feel most unburdened. If your eyes are still hovering open, perhaps you can let your eyelids drift shut, inviting the cool dark to envelop your vision. Nothing in this descented room is asking you to churn your thoughts, produce brilliant ideas, or prove your depth to anyone. Draw a slow, unhurried breath in through your nose, letting the cool air expand your chest, and then release it softly through your mouth, letting your spine sink into the mattress like damp linen, settling into a deep stoneware vat. You do not need to count your inhalations or regulate their cadence. Simply permit your torso to rise and fall the way. Cool mountain stream water flows quietly through timber flumes, steady, unforced, and completely at ease with every quiet exhale. Perhaps you can feel a subtle loosening in the strained muscles around your cheeks, your jaw, your throat, and the delicate space behind your collarbones. If a cold contraction of imposter panic or creative dread remains locked in your chest, that is completely fine as well. You do not need to push that feeling away or force your mind to feel inspired. Even noticing that old urge to boil your thoughts without judging yourself is a moment of deep, gentle restoration. As you rest here in the cool darkness, allow your attention to turn softly toward one specific creative worry or performance fear that has been weighing on your mind tonight. It might be a blank page you faced earlier, a project that felt shallow, or a persistent terror that your work holds no genuine value. Do not try to solve that creative problem right now, and do not attempt to force a brilliant realization before morning comes. Simply let that feeling of emptiness sit quietly in the dark space of your awareness, like a piece of raw, unbleached linen waiting in the shade. Perhaps you can give a very soft, silent name to what your spirit is experiencing. You might whisper to yourself, "This is the exhaustion of trying to be brilliant." Or perhaps, "This is my mind trying to churn the vat with fire." By naming this internal pattern with a gentle, forgiving voice, you step back from the edge of panic. You begin to observe the old habit of self-doubt without letting it scorch your fine fibers. Now, if it feels right, bring to your mind's eye the image of a broad, cool stoneware vat filled with dark, fermenting indigo liquid, resting safely on the damp floor of a quiet mountain dye house. Picture its smooth glazed rim, its deep still surface, and its cool temperature. Smell the surrounding atmosphere of fermenting leaves, damp limestone, wood ash, and cold water drifting through the timber walls. Imagine taking that heavy iron dye paddle of frantic effort, along with the scorching charcoal heat of your imposter panic, and placing them gently into a dark wooden trough sitting on the stone floor beside the vat. You do not need to smash the iron tool with anger, nor do you need to douse the fire with violence. You simply lay the heavy paddle down on the ash, stepping away from the hearth, and let the fire extinguish itself in the cool night air. Watch what happens in your imagination when the iron paddle is laid down and the fire dies away. Picture your raw linen fiber submerging softly beneath the cool, dark surface of the indigo bath. You do not need to churn the water or scrub the threads against the stoneware. You simply watch the damp fabric resting completely still in the dark liquid, soaking quietly, absorbing the cool nourishment of the bath without a single moment of friction. Imagine gently lifting that wet fiber out of the dark bath and holding it up into the cool night air that drifts through the open timber window. Watch the miracle of oxidation unfold behind your eyes. The pale, unimpressive green fiber touches the quiet night air, and without any effort from your hands, it transforms into a deep, luminous cobalt blue. If your mind strays back into its old habit of auditing your talent, or trying to draft impressive thoughts for tomorrow, there is no need to feel disappointed in yourself. Your mind has been trying to protect you from failure for a very long time, and old habits of performance anxiety do not vanish in a single night. Whenever you catch yourself reaching for the iron paddle again, simply notice that movement with a soft, forgiving heart. You can quietly say to yourself, "My mind is trying to boil the vat again." And then imagine letting your gaze return to that wet cobalt linen breathing in the cool night air once more. You can return to this quiet, unheated bath whenever you are ready, as many times as you need tonight. There is no creative exam you must pass before you are permitted to fall asleep. You do not need to prove your depth, nor do you need to demonstrate your genius before dawn arrives. Healing your relationship with your creative nature is not a sudden event where all doubt vanishes forever. It is a series of quiet, hidden moments where you choose to lay down the iron paddle and permit your fiber to breathe in open air. Even a single breath spent honoring your unforced presence permits your nervous system to taste the deep safety that lives beyond imposter fear. Feel the easy, natural movement of your chest continuing its silent work in the dark. Cool air fills your lungs, lifting your ribs slightly, and flows out with a long, soft fall. The solid weight of your head, your shoulders, and your legs is completely supported by the bed beneath you, You do not need to be brilliant tonight. You do not need to prove your substance to anyone. The mattress is holding you, the room is enclosing you, and the cool stoneware vat of this present hour is completely broad enough to carry your rest. In a short while, we will travel deeper into the drying courtyard, where an elder master weaver shows how indigo thread gains its unshakable strength, not by constant pulling, but by resting between dips on cedar racks. But for now, allow yourself to remain right here in your bed. Let the cool, deep blue of the oxidized linen rest quietly behind your eyes. Let your jaw remain loose and your hands soft upon the sheets, knowing that nothing needs to be boiled, nothing needs to be forced, and that your unforced heart is completely safe enough to rest tonight. Farther down the valley, in a quiet, drying courtyard enclosed by tall cedar racks behind the lower monastery walls, the night air smelled of drying thread, cool mountain grass, cedar smoke, and damp river gravel. Working as a master yarn handler in this secluded courtyard was a young weaver named Jiro, who suffered under an even deeper, more suffocating panic regarding his creative substance. Jiro was responsible for preparing skeins of wet indigo yarn before they were wound onto the large temple looms. He carried an unrelenting, secret dread that his spinning lacked genuine structural integrity, believing that unless every thread was pulled to its absolute limit, the finished tapestry would sag, exposing his inner incompetence to the entire order. This obsessive dread turned Jiro's nightly inspection into a torment of constant strain. Every evening while the monastery slept, Jiro walked among the long rows of wet blue yarn hanging from cedar frames. On his right thumb, he wore a specialized tool, a carved bone thread gauge ring with a narrow notched groove. He used this ring to catch individual strands of damp yarn, pulling them with sharp, aggressive jerks to test their breaking point. Whenever a wet thread yielded or stretched under the force of his thumb, Jiro felt a cold spike of panic in his chest, convincing himself that the entire skein was worthless and fragile. On a freezing midnight, as a thick frost settled over the gravel courtyard, Jiro reached an emotional breaking point. A large commission of deep blue yarn for the sanctuary winter altar hangings was resting on the racks after its second dye bath. Driven by a sudden, intense fear that the color was merely a superficial glaze masking weak cotton fibers, Jiro moved down the row with his bone gauge ring, hooking wet threads and snapping them backward with desperate force. He pulled harder and harder, testing strand after strand in the dim lantern light. His fingers were stiff with cold, his breath coming in jagged white plumes. Instead of verifying the yarn's strength, his violent testing began to shred the delicate wet fibers. With a series of sharp pinging sounds, an entire section of wet indigo yarn snapped across the cedar frame. The broken blue threads unraveled into a tangled, useless mass on the damp gravel floor. Jiro dropped his lantern onto the stones. He sat back on his heels in the freezing grass, trembling, his hands stained dark blue, his chest hollowed out by pure despair. He stared at the ruined pile of yarn, convinced that he had ruined the sacred commission through his own incurable defect. In his mind, those snapped threads proved that he was an imposter who possessed no true understanding of the craft, someone who only succeeded in destroying whatever he touched out of sheer incompetence. Walking slowly between the cedar racks, carrying a small bundle of dry willow twigs, was Master Ren, an elder weaver who had cared for the monastery looms for over 40 years. Master Ren wore a faded blue robe lined with warm sheepskin, his shoulders slightly rounded, his movements unhurried like a deep river. He had watched Jiro's Latinite testing for many nights, observing how the young man's fear turned a gentle craft into a war against the fiber. Master set his bundle of willow twigs on a bench and knelt beside Jiro in the damp grass. He did not scold Jiro for breaking the precious yarn, nor did he offer a quick, cheerful reassurance about fixing the loom. Instead, he reached down into the cold gravel, picked up a single broken strand of wet blue yarn, and held it out across his palm in the lantern glow. Master Ren asked Jiro to look closely at the broken tip of the wet thread. Jiro leaned forward, his eyes burning with unshed tears, looking at the tiny blue fibers fraying under the light. Master Ren gently explained that when cotton yarn is lifted wet from an indigo vat, its internal fibers are soft, open, and resting in a state of delicate vulnerability. If a weaver forces an iron or bone gauge against the damp thread, demanding that it demonstrate absolute rigidity before it has dried. The thread will always break. The strength of indigo yarn does not come from violent testing while it is wet. It develops slowly as the thread rests untouched on the cedar rack, letting the air bind the fibers together in their own quiet time. Master Ren reached over and took the carved bone gauge ring from Jiro's thumb. He set the bone ring softly upon the wooden bench beside the willow twigs. Then he took a fresh, unclipped skein of wet indigo yarn, hung it loosely over a cedar bar, and asked Jiro to sit beside him on the bench without touching the thread for 3 full breaths. Jiro sat beside the old master in the freezing courtyard air. His body was tense, his mind screaming at him to fix the mess, to test the remaining skeins, to prove that he was not a failure. Master Ren placed a hand lightly on Jiro's knee, asking him to simply feel his own breath moving in his throat, and to watch the damp blue skein hang undisturbed in the night breeze. Jiro took one slow, deliberate breath. The cool air filled his lungs, smelling of damp earth and cedar bark. He took a second breath, feeling the tight contraction around his ribs begin to yield slightly. He took a third breath, letting his shoulders drop down away from his ears. As they sat in silence, the gentle night wind moved through the hanging skein. The wet threads swayed softly against the cedar wood, completely untouched, completely untested, absorbing the cool air in quiet peace. A quiet realization washed through Jiro's heart, softer than the frost on the grass. He saw how his entire life had been driven by that bone gauge ring, constantly hooking his own thoughts, jerking his own feelings, demanding that his mind prove its strength before it even had time to settle. He recognized that his intense fear of being empty had caused him to snap his own spirit again and again. Jiro looked at the bone gauge ring sitting on the bench. He did not smash it, nor did he throw it away in shame. He picked it up with his blue-stained fingers, walked over to a small wooden cabinet attached to the courtyard wall, and placed the ring inside, closing the door softly without a latch. He returned to the tangled pile of broken yarn on the gravel. Rather than weeping over his failure or trying to hide the evidence, he began to gather the frayed threads with gentle, patient hands, coiling them neatly into a small basket to be recycled into soft paper pulp. He still felt the quiet sting of his mistake, and his hands were still cold, but the frantic panic had left his chest, replaced by an unhurried willingness to let the wet yarn rest upon the cedar frames in peace. The quiet image of Jiro laying his bone ring inside the cabinet illuminates the inner architecture of our daily mental exhaustion. So much of the heavy weight you carry when you lie awake at night comes from this relentless habit of testing your own spirit while it is still wet. We take a quiet gap in our ideas, a temporary feeling of uncertainty, or a momentary pause in our momentum, and treat it as a catastrophic emergency. We hook our thoughts with sharp internal instruments, jerking our confidence to see if it will break, frantically trying to guarantee our future success before the present hour has even had time to breathe. This desperate need to verify our substance is driven by a deep fear of being found empty. When a creative project or professional responsibility rests before us, our internal judge steps forward immediately. We replay old moments where our work was ignored, project terrifying scenarios where our ideas fail, and attempt to fix our present anxiety by dousing ourselves in intense shame. We begin to view our natural, unformed state as a shameful secret that must be hidden. We stop experiencing our mind as an open, fertile space, and start treating our spirit as a fragile, broken thread that must be constantly yanked and scolded to prove its strength. Yet this habit of hooking your own thoughts with a bone ring is a form of internal violence that turns the simple vulnerability of learning into unbearable torture. When you refuse to let your wet yarn hang undisturbed on the cedar rack, you are operating from a mindset of deep self-distrust. You begin to define your identity through your fear of failure, turning your creative panic into a permanent prison. You stop noticing the quiet peace of the room around you, because your attention is entirely consumed by the frayed, broken threads of your own overthinking. Buddhist reflection offers a gentle, illuminating lens that reveals this pattern without any judgment or blame. It asks us to look closely at the vital difference between the natural vulnerability that life brings and the heavy, extra suffering our own minds construct through resistance and self-chastisement. Moving through a creative, Conscious life means that ideas will sometimes feel raw, words will occasionally stumble, and moments of quiet unknowing will naturally occur. Those changing internal tides are simple, neutral realities inside a living human experience. However, the agonizing, sleepless paralysis that keeps your chest tight at midnight is not the raw idea or the quiet pause itself. It is the extra misery created by your decision to violently pull at your own wet fibers, blinding your own heart with panic because you are terrified of being ordinary. It is like a weaver standing in a quiet courtyard who, instead of letting his dyed thread dry in the night breeze, constantly jerks the damp strands until they snap, crying out that his loom is ruined. The cool wind moving across the gravel is the primary reality of the night. The snapped threads, stiff fingers, and bitter despair are the secondary suffering created entirely by his refusal to let the damp yarn rest in peace. True peace does not arrive when you finally engineer a mind that never experiences self-doubt. Freedom begins the very moment you slip the bone gauge ring off your thumb, close the cabinet door, and step onto the quiet gravel without demanding proof of your brilliance. The unwritten chapters of your work will continue to unfold as they always have. You can write your sentences, design your projects, and meet your daily duties with practical care, but jerking your own spirit with shame will never make your work any deeper. Consider how much of your internal exhaustion comes from attempting to force a wet thread to be as stiff as iron. We collapse into late-night burnout because we falsely believe that resting in quiet unknowing is a dangerous weakness. But your true nature is not a fragile strand that snaps the moment a cold breeze touches it. Your awareness is like the vast, cedar-lined courtyard itself, spacious, grounded, and patient, capable of holding both the damp skein and the dry thread without losing its quiet stability. When you surrender the impossible demand to prove your depth every single hour, a massive weight dissolves from your chest. The tight, guarded muscles around your throat and ribs, which have been strained for years to maintain a shield of total competence, can finally begin to soften. Your lungs find room to draw a long, unhurried breath of cool night air. You begin to understand that allowing your mind to be soft and quiet, letting your thoughts rest in their natural state without being tested by shame, is not an act of lazy surrender. It is the fundamental foundation of authentic inner peace. You are fully permitted to be a quiet, unformed thread resting on a cedar bar, rather than a forced spectacle performing for applause. Your value as a living soul was never tied to the constant demonstration of genius, or the absolute absence of doubt. You were born with a quiet, organic depth, fully equipped to absorb the colors of life, capable of maturing into strength in your own unhurried season tonight. As you lie here in the dark, feeling the cool air move softly across your pillow, notice when your mind attempts to pull you back into its old testing habits. It might whisper that you are an imposter who must prove their worth before morning, or that you must solve every creative uncertainty right now. Observe that thought with soft, unhurried presence. You do not need to fight the thought, nor do you need to pick up a single ring for it. You can simply view it as a stray rustle of wind, moving through cedar racks, carrying no power to break the quiet depth resting deep beneath your bed. This wisdom of laying down the iron paddle, closing the cabinet door on the bone gauge ring, and permitting your raw fiber to oxidize slowly in open air, belongs directly inside the small, demanding moments of your modern routine. It finds its truest purpose during those quiet hours when your mind starts frantically trying to force brilliant color from a quiet spirit. Consider how easily this habit of performance panic shows up on a completely ordinary afternoon. You sit at a desk or stare at a glowing screen, holding a cursor over a blank document or an unfinished email draft. A quiet gap appears in your ideas, a temporary stillness where no immediate clever phrase arrives. A sharp spike of imposter panic hits your throat. Instead of allowing that stillness to remain a natural, cool bath where thoughts rest and mature, your mind panics. You immediately reach for the iron paddle of self-criticism, telling yourself that your intelligence has dried up, comparing your slow pace to the rapid output of peers, feeling your chest lock into a tight defensive knot long before the sun goes down. In that exact moment, when the screen sits cool on your desk, you are trying to boil your stoneware vat with harsh fire. But wisdom offers you a quiet, spacious choice before you stir the liquid into a foam. You can let your hands rest flat on the wooden desk. You can feel the solid floor pressing against the soles of your feet. Take one slow breath into your lower ribs and let the urge to force immediate brilliance dissolve into the air. Choosing not to obey that internal whip is how you step away from the hearth. It is a brave, quiet decision to let your damp threads hang softly on the cedar rack, trusting that your mind knows how to gather depth without being scorched by panic. Or think about those heavy late nights when you carry an exhausting guilt for wanting to sleep, without having produced something impressive first. You lie down after a long, demanding day, feeling a profound weariness in your muscles. Yet the moment your head touches the pillow, an internal audit begins. It reviews every sentence you spoke, scolds you for feeling tired, and insists that relaxing without a proven record of success is an unearned luxury. You smile politely through meetings, pretending that your energy is endless, while a cold, heavy doubt churns behind your ribs. When those waves of comparative shame and imposter panic threaten to steal your night, you can choose to stop treating your natural quietness as a shameful defect. You do not need to prove your substance by forcing your spirit through a boiling cauldron. You can allow your awareness to settle like damp linen receiving cool night air, absorbing its nourishment without apologizing for its stillness. Giving yourself full permission to close your eyes, to leave a project unfinished until tomorrow, or to lie still in the dark without fixing your life is how you permit your raw fiber to rest in cool stoneware. Notice too how often this fear of inner emptiness leaks into your relationships and your daily peace. You send a message to someone you respect, and when the reply is delayed, your mind immediately assumes you were too uninteresting, or that your words lack true substance. You check your phone for reassurance, analyze subtle shifts in tone, and attempt to control the connection by over-explaining yourself, treating your bond like a wet indigo skein that will break if you do not pull it with a bone ring every hour. Yet the deep blue fabric hanging in the sanctuary drying shed does not earn its color by screaming for attention. It absorbs its rich cobalt shade precisely because it was permitted to soak gently in the dark vat and then rest undisturbed in the mountain breeze. Peace is not a reward granted only to those who produce endless spectacles. Peace is the natural, quiet ground that emerges the moment you stop treating your unvarnished human self as a mistake. Giving yourself unconditional permission to lie flat in this dark room tonight, without calculating your worth or begging for validation, is how you align your heart with the deep wisdom of the Die House. Living this path in your modern life does not mean you abandon your craft or treat your goals with cold carelessness. It expresses itself in the softest, most practical pauses of your day. It is taking a gentle breath before reacting with shame to a moment of confusion. It is choosing to put away your phone when your mind demands a quick hit of reassurance. It is the quiet, steady realization that your mind is not a shallow vessel that dries up without constant friction, but a deep stoneware bath that naturally matures its richness in silence. You do not need to solve every creative doubt by tomorrow morning. The Zen path is not about instantly erasing every old habit of imposter anxiety that made you reach for the iron paddle in the past. It is simply about noticing the moment your fingers tighten around the handle out of panic, and gently choosing to lay the blade on the ash instead. When you practice living as a raw fiber taking color through quiet oxidation rather than forced heat, your daily life recovers an unshakable dignity. You can write your drafts, speak your truth, and then return to your natural rest when the work is done. You step out of the exhausting role of the desperate performer, returning to your true nature as a quiet vessel holding deep, unforced color. As these late hours settle softly over your room right now, allow these simple truths to cool the remaining friction in your nerves. You have wielded enough iron paddles through smoky dye houses today. You have pulled your own wet threads, enough to satisfy your mind's internal judges. The long day of proving your depth, checking your output, and fearing emptiness has fully retreated into the dark. The night has opened a vast, peaceful sanctuary around your bed, offering a shelter where no thought needs to be boiled, no thread needs to be jerked, and no heart needs to feel fraudulent. Feel the easy, natural movement of your chest, continuing its silent work in the dark. Cool air fills your lungs, lifting your ribs slightly, and flows out with a long, soft fall. You are completely permitted to set down your die paddles and bone rings for the night. You are allowed to let every performance worry, every comparative fear, and every dread of being ordinary dissolve into the wide, dark stillness outside your room. The broad, cool bath this present hour is holding you, deep and still, ready to support your entire weight without asking for a single brilliant word tonight. Now, let every iron paddle, every scorching charcoal fire, and every carved bone gauge ring fade quietly into the cool night mist of the northern gorge. The quiet journeys of Kale laying his paddle on the wet stone floor, and Jiro placing his bone ring inside the wall cabinet, have completed their steady work within your spirit. They are no longer distant parables told beside a mountain dye house, but are soaking down like dark indigo liquor settling into deep limestone stoneware, permeating the subterranean depths of your awareness. The frantic demand to force instant brilliance has stopped. The heavy paddle rests cold in the ash. The drying courtyard is still and dark, leaving your hands soft, cool, and resting unburdened upon the sheets. Your physical body is becoming deeply, delightfully heavy against the steady mattress beneath you. Feel your shoulders, your chest, and your hips yielding their last subtle guard, sinking half an inch deeper into the soft bedding. Your eyelids feel weighted, smooth, and completely relaxed, as if a gentle vapor of fermenting leaves, damp limestone water, and cedar smoke had brushed over your forehead, clearing away every remaining trace of creative panic and imposter anxiety. The subtle tightness behind your cheeks, your jaw, and your collarbones dissolves completely, allowing your airway to open into an easy, spacious passage where cool night air moves softly, carrying no need to prove your talent or demonstrate your depth tonight. Every breath you draw now is growing slower, softer, and completely silent. A quiet stream of air enters, lifting your torso like cool alpine wind drifting through timber drying's heads, and then glides out like damp indigo linen swaying in total silence. Inhale, slow, smooth, and effortless. Exhale, long, quiet, and uncalculated. You are not testing the strength of your threads. You are simply letting your unforced frame breathe itself. Natural, cool, and completely content upon its present stoneware foundation. Picture a quiet timber drying shed sitting beside a mountain stream at midnight. Outside, a gentle wind rustles through the cool valley grass, carrying the earthy aroma of fermenting indigo, damp gravel, limestone water, and cedar smoke. Deep within the timber shelter, long banners of deep cobalt linen hang motionless from overhead cedar racks, their rich color fully bloomed, holding a luminous depth that required no fire to ignite and no iron blade to force. There are no boiling cauldrons threatening to scorch delicate threads, no bone rings testing wet yarn, and no harsh lights demanding a sudden spectacle. The drying shed rests quiet, cold, and fully enclosed under a vast starry sky, holding every piece of raw fiber in dark, unhurried peace. Inside your own chest, that exact same cool, unforced depth is quietly resting right now. The sharp panic over creative emptiness and secret fraudulence has dissolved into the night air. It has drifted out through the timber slats, carried away into the vast mountain night, where no mind needs to boil its thoughts to prove its worth. You do not need a completed masterpiece to step into tomorrow. You do not need to guarantee your creative genius to deserve deep rest. The vast night is broad enough to enclose every quiet pause, and gentle enough to let your raw linen absorb its rich blue without making a single effort. Feel the deep heaviness in your legs, knees, and ankles, melting into the supportive bed beneath you. Feel your feet resting motionless upon the sheets, completely freed from the long day of running on internal treadmills and begging for approval. There are no artistic tests you must pass in this dark room tonight, no creative problems you must solve, and no fear of emptiness heavy enough to disturb the cool stoneware of your presence right now. You have returned home to the quiet, unheated bath that was always yours. Give your mind total permission to drop its long, exhausting performance. You do not have to solve the puzzle of your talent. You do not need to guarantee a brilliant output before morning comes. Those future drafts belong to the sunrise outside, and you are resting far inside the quiet timber drying shed now, where iron paddles hold no purpose and boiling raw fiber is no longer allowed. If a stray thought about a blank page or a shallow idea floats through the dark, let it be like a dull copper-green thread touching the cool night air, transforming softly into deep cobalt before dissolving into the darkness. You do not need to stir the vat. You do not need to test the fiber with a ring. You can simply watch the night breeze touch the hanging banners, leaving your central awareness cool, deep, and completely undisturbed. The night has built a quiet, impenetrable sanctuary around your bed, protecting your emotional weariness from the relentless demands and loud spectacles of the world outside. The morning will arrive in its own time, bringing its own light and its own quiet words to your lips. But tonight belongs entirely to rest. Tonight is a sacred sanctuary where your spirit is permitted to set down its iron tools, wash its dye-stained hands, and sink into the rich, unhurried depth of its present unforced nature. You are safe here in the quiet dark. Your mind knows how to gather color without a fire. Your thoughts know how to settle into depth like fermenting leaves in a dark stoneware vessel. Your core spirit knows how to bloom when the mind finally stops churning the vat and lets the wet fiber breathe in peace. Let yourself sink down through the soft, cool layers of sleep, floating down into the deep, dark stoneware where no judges wait, where no threads are pulled, and where your true nature rests forever unheated, unforced, and profoundly at peace. When the cool night air touches the damp cloth in total darkness, does the linen ever panic about the color it is about to become? The quiet dark within the timber drying shed deepens, holding your frame in a calm, spacious stillness that feels ancient and undisturbed. Out in the courtyard, the cool wind sways the hanging banners without a single sound, touching every wet thread with soft, unhurried care. The indigo fibers do not struggle against the air, nor do they rush to prove the richness of their blue. They simply hang suspended from the cedar racks, trusting the silent, organic process that turns dull green into deep cobalt while the night passes over the valley. When you allow your mind to step away from its relentless internal testing, your awareness returns to that exact same unforced natural depth. The creative panic and imposter anxiety that tightened your chest today were not permanent truths about your worth. They were merely temporary clouds of heat generated by a mind that forgot how to let its fiber rest in the cool dark. Consider how a simple stoneware vat sits on the stone floor of the dye house year after year. It does not boil its liquid to prove its utility, nor does it ask for constant validation from the artisans who pass through the door. It holds its cool, dark fermenting bath in total stillness, allowing time and air to accomplish what force could never achieve. When you look upon your life without the harsh glare of performance panic, you begin to see that your spirit is like that broad stoneware vessel. The moments where your thoughts feel quiet or unformed are not signs of emptiness or creative failure. They are the necessary, fertile pauses where true depth gathers beneath the surface. You do not need to churn your thoughts with heavy iron paddles to be worthy of peace. Your presence alone, quiet and unvarnished, is completely enough to hold every color your life will ever bring. Allow your physical frame to yield even deeper into the supportive bed beneath you. Feel the steady mattress carrying your shoulders, your spine, your hips, and your legs in total, unconditioned ease. Your breath moves in a slow, rhythmic cadence, like the faint rustle of night air drifting through cedar roof slats, entering and leaving without a single moment of strain. There are no drafts of words you must refine in the dark. There are no audience expectations you must meet before dawn arrives. Time is not running out, and your talent is not slipping away into the void. You are resting safely inside your own unheated sanctuary, where no fire is lit and no performance is ever demanded. The cool air surrounding your bed carries a quiet, grounding presence that invites every remaining tension in your body to melt away. In this peaceful room, you are not a fraud trying to hide your true nature, nor are you a performer who must earn their right to rest through constant spectacle. You are simply a living soul, held gently by the quiet earth, fully permitted to exist in your raw, unforced state. Everything that demanded your frantic effort today has been set aside outside the timber walls. The iron paddle lies still upon the cold ash. The bone thumb ring rests enclosed in the wooden cabinet, and the broad indigo vat holds its cool liquid in complete, unshakable tranquility. Think of how the high mountain gorge outside holds the entire valley in quiet shelter tonight. The stone dye houses, the wooden racks, the cold alpine streams, and the dark forest trees all rest together under the starry sky. Without a single conflict, they do not compete for space, nor do they panic over the turning of the seasons. They yield to the night with quiet dignity, trusting that the earth beneath them remains deep, strong, and enduring. Your heart belongs to that same quiet world. It knows how to hold your gifts and your doubts with equal grace, without letting fear scorch the fine threads of your spirit. You do not need to force your mind into a spectacle. You need only to allow your raw fiber to soak in the peaceful stillness that fills this hour. Let the soft weight of your head sink deeper into the pillow. Let your forehead, your jaw, and the delicate muscles around your throat release their very last hold on the day. Feel how quiet your breath has become, moving like a soft current of cool stream water through timber flumes, smooth, silent, and completely unhurried. Every inhalation brings fresh, soothing ease into your frame, and every exhalation releases the lingering compulsion to prove your worth. You are fully permitted to set down your fire. You are allowed to be quiet, to be unformed, and to let your unheated spirit absorb its natural depth and peace while you sleep. As you float closer to deep, unbroken sleep, feel the quiet comfort of knowing that your authentic substance was never manufactured through panic. Your life is an unforced, luminous banner, taking its color from a quiet, subterranean well that no self-doubt can ever dry up. The care you bring to your work, the honesty you hold in your heart, and the quiet resilience you carry are woven deeply into the fiber of who you are right now. You carry that unshakable truth within your spirit, cool, deep, and steady, like a stoneware vessel resting undisturbed through a mountain night. There are no creative tests left to take, no wet threads left to pull, and no imposter fears left to conquer in the dark. The hearth is cold, the courtyard is silent, and the room is wrapped in soft, protective darkness. Let your awareness dissolve gently into the quiet stillness around your bed. Let your body sink down through the cool, soothing layers of rest, supported by the broad, unyielding earth beneath your home. Floating down into the deep, dark sanctuary of sleep, you are held, you are safe, and your unforced heart rests forever in complete and profound peace. The heavy cedar posts of the drying shed hold the night with patient strength, guarding your rest from the cold alpine winds that sweep across the high mountain gorge. Beneath the wooden roof, the air remains soft, cool, and fragrant, with the quiet scents of damp limestone, fermenting leaves, and rich forest earth. Every moment in this peaceful space reminds your body that it is safe to lay down its guard, offering an unburdened shelter where no mind is judged by its speed or its output. You do not need to produce a single brilliant thought for tomorrow, nor do you need to justify your quiet presence to the world outside. Simply lying here in the cool dark, feeling the natural, easy rhythm of your breath is completely enough to restore your spirit. Notice how the soft rise and fall of your chest aligns with the quiet stillness of the night. Inhaling softly brings cool, clear rest into your body, and exhaling softly lets that rest settle into the deep, unheated center of your spirit. With every quiet breath, your limbs grow heavier. Your thoughts drift farther away, and the boundary between your awareness and the peaceful darkness around you gently fades. You are enclosed by a vast, protective quiet that knows no fear of emptiness and no dread of being ordinary. Everything is still, everything is resting, and the vast night sky holds your life in total, effortless safety. Let yourself sink softly into the dark, welcoming depths of deep sleep. Feel your mind letting go of its last performance worries, like raw fiber taking its rich color in quiet stoneware. There are no iron tools waiting for you in the dark, no tests to pass, and no creative panics to solve before the sun rises. You are resting inside your own unforced sanctuary, cradled in the deep, enduring peace of your own unheated nature. Sleep arrives naturally now, smooth, soft, and profound, carrying your tired spirit into total rest.